Interstate 80. Yeah. Alright, today we are talking about Interstate 80 westbound. It's going to be an awesome video. There's a lot to talk about. And if you missed the eastbound video, you can find the link to that right over here. Interstate 80 is a behemoth, as we see. It goes from just outside of New York City on the New Jersey side all the way into San Francisco. So it is awesome. You're watching Control City Freak. This is the YouTube channel where we talk about interstate highways and the places that they are assigned to go to. If you dig this kind of content, go ahead and give us a like. And if you're really into it, why not hit that subscribe button? Yeah, subscribe. Woohoo! Alright, as I said, we're going to talk about westbound I-80 today. Lots of stuff we didn't hit on the eastbound side coming up, including a couple of spur routes. We are before I-80 starts here. This is in Manhattan on the Henry Hudson Parkway. I'm only bringing this up to show you that there is no signage for I-80 at this intersection. So we cross the George Washington Bridge. We got to look behind us to see it because for some reason there's no street view on the George Washington Bridge. And on the very first sign, there is a small I-80 shield, or rather there was, because they've replaced this sign. Here's what this sign looks like now, so no mention of I-80 yet. Not to worry though, pretty soon into New Jersey on I-95 we do get signs for I-80, so we see 95, 80 pretty much all over the place. They almost act as if though they are concurrent, although I-80 technically doesn't yet exist here. Here is where 95 and 80 split, so we are signed for 80 Patterson, New Jersey, which I'm not a huge fan of because it's a suburb, but then again, it's a big suburb, like 150,000 people. So it does make sense to sign it because the next, logical options aren't really that logical either. So Patterson's fine here. And we see West 80 Patterson on the first pull-through sign that is on I-80 itself. We meet Highway 19 for downtown Patterson, and now we are on 80 West Delaware Water Gap. So this is kind of where things go sideways in I-80. This should not be Delaware Water Gap here. Here's where we meet 287, and once again, 80 is Delaware Water Gap. On the mileage sign, the only mileage sign I could find in New Jersey, because exits are pretty close together, we get Delaware Water Gap 25 here. This is the last major interchange in New Jersey, exit 4, so we get 80 West Delaware Water Gap and Stroudsburg, PA at this point. We've only got one more exit for the gap itself. Here we are driving through the Delaware Water Gap, and as I mentioned in the eastbound video, it looks lovely. It looks really awesome. It's the nicest scenery you're going to pass an I-80 for probably a couple thousand miles. As always, we need to pay a toll to get out of New Jersey, so that is coming up shortly. And we cross the Delaware River, heading toward Pennsylvania. Of course, first we have to pay our toll before we can be actually welcomed into PA. And Pennsylvania welcomes you. At the first interchange in Pennsylvania, we get signed East 80 Delaware Water Gap, West 80 Stroudsburg, which is straight up ahead, the next town over, just the next exit. Right now would be a good time to cue the music. There's no easy way out. Oh, okay. You guys don't want another montage here. I'm not going to do another montage. I'll go ahead and talk about PA. Not too far out of Stroudsburg, we meet 380. 380 is signed for Scranton, which is what I think 80 should be signed for from Patterson, New Jersey. Scranton is the next place along the line anybody's going to know. 380 is angling the right way from westbound I-80. And plus, later we're signed for Williamsport, and 80 doesn't go there. That's 180, so why not sign Scranton? 80 West Hazleton. We meet I-81 just outside of Hazleton, and I-81 is getting surprisingly good control cities for Pennsylvania and for I-81, because usually neither of those are too good. And we get 80 West Bloomsburg at this point, and I don't know what that is, and I'm not going to find out. In Bloomsburg, we get Williamsport. And again, 80 doesn't go to Williamsport, you have to get there through 180, so why not sign it for Scranton somewhere? We meet 180 for Williamsport, and 80 West Belafonte. I feel like they're just making stuff up. This is like that Simpsons episode where they talk about the monorail.
Monorails to Brockway, Ogdenville, and North Haverbrook, and by gum, it put them on
now
the map.
Ridiculously, there's so much wrong with this. So we don't get an overhead sign for I-99. I know it's not a high-speed interchange, but still, it's an interstate. There should be an overhead sign. We get 99 South Belafonte, that should say 99 South State College, and in fact, we should have been signed for State College ever since the 380 intersection to go to Scranton. At the north end of I-99, it's even worse. We don't have any sort of overhead anything. We just get these small signs, and we're signed for 80 West Dubois? I didn't look it up. In Dubois, or Dubois, we get Belafonte and Sharon signed, so Sharon is being signed a little early here. At the next exit, we get Clarion instead of Sharon, so Clarion is a little bit closer to here, which I don't have to tell you, I'm sure, because you all know exactly where Sharon and Clarion are. These are places everybody knows. You get to the highest point on I-80 east of the Mississippi, and there is some pretty nice scenery on I-80 in Pennsylvania, and plus no tolls, so that's a plus for this road, but yeah, the control cities are just abysmal. At this interchange, we get 80 West Sharon at this point. I believe we are in Clarion now. And we meet I-79. I-79 gets good control cities, and 80 is still West Sharon. No, it should be Youngstown. It should be Youngstown from the 99 junction on. Alright, a lot of people commented about 376 when I mentioned it in the other video, the 80 East video, saying that it should be Newcastle and not Pittsburgh. I heartily disagree. 80 can sign Cleveland multiple times on different roads as it goes south of Cleveland. It could sign Pittsburgh a couple of times going north of Pittsburgh. I know it's closer to Cleveland, but come on. Newcastle is not a significant place. Only 20,000 people. Sign Pittsburgh. You can sign Pittsburgh more than once. It's okay. Also, now we just get 80 West because we're almost at the end of Pennsylvania, so I guess that's the edge of the world. Can't sign anything else. On 376 itself, though, we are getting West 80 Youngstown. Here toward the end of Pennsylvania, we get Youngstown and Cleveland because there's no more Pennsylvania cities to sign, and there's no more exits in Pennsylvania. And we arrive in Ohio. I tell you, I have never been this happy to get to Ohio before. Whew! Alright, now we get 80 West Cleveland because we have the exit for Youngstown here, so Cleveland. Heard of that? Good job, Ohio. Now we're meeting 76 at the 8076 Youngstown bump. 8076 are signed for Cleveland and Pittsburgh, as well they should be. We see on the ramps we're going to go on 80 West Cleveland and not 76 Pittsburgh. And we're getting on the Ohio Turnpike here. Before we get to Cleveland, we get this divide between Great Lakes and Mississippi River watersheds sign, which is a pretty cool, interesting sign. Although, is there a divide? I thought that's kind of the whole purpose of Chicago. Good signage here, 485 miles, Streetsboro, and then Cleveland as our final and primary control city. We meet 480, and interestingly, 80 and 480 are both signed for Cleveland here. Suppose you can get to different parts of town depending on which one you take. Now we meet I-77, and 77 also signed for Cleveland. 80 is just signed for Toledo from this point. More good signage. We've got the next exit. We've got a secondary town, and we've got our primary of Toledo. We meet I-71. 71 also signed for Cleveland. 80 West Toledo still. Here at Ohio 57, I feel like they should mention that this is the way to get to eastbound I-90. I know there might not be a lot of traffic going to 90, but 80 and 90 meet in a Y junction, so there's no crossover to 90 from 80. This was not the only sign I looked at, and there was no mention of 90 on any of the signs that I could see. Here's our first reassurance shield of what I believe is the longest concurrency in the country, 80 and 90. And now we get a nice 80-90 West Toledo. We meet 280, which is signed for Toledo, so now we're on 80-90 Chicago. We're not going to keep going Toledo to I-75. We're going right for Chicago from here. And here is the intersection with I-75 that I just mentioned, and 80-90 West Chicago. Right after leaving Toledo, here's our first mileage sign that we see, and we get Delta 21, Chicago 230. And close to the Indiana border, now we get only Indiana interchanges. I-69, it's a good sign because where I-69 meets the toll road is not a famous or big town. South Bend 96 and Chicago 184. A lot of people think South Bend should be a primary, and for eastbound, I do think you could make a case for it. Toledo is not a huge place compared to South Bend. It's bigger, but it's not a huge place. And also eastbound, there is a lot of Notre Dame alumni and fans who live in the Chicagoland area who will be going to South Bend for games. So I do think signing South Bend eastbound kind of works, but westbound Chicago as the primary is definitely the way to go. We come into Indiana, and now we get a Lincoln's boyhood home. Definitely an upgrade over the Benjamin Harrison signing we've seen otherwise in Indiana. Here's one of the few things to complain about in Indiana. We get 69, and just as before, we get no overhead sign for I-69 as it goes to Fort Wayne and Lansing. If we take a look to our right here, those hills in the distance are Michigan, because we are very close to the Michigan border at this point. Get another sensible mileage sign here, South Bend 9, Gary 67, Chicago 97. Here's the exit for South Bend and Notre Dame. This should definitely be an overhead sign as well because of all the traffic going to Notre Dame games. Skipping ahead to the start of the Borman, 90 sign west to Chicago in a vertical way, the way they always seem to do in this part of Indiana. 80 west, 94 Des Moines. And we see 80's main line is only going to be one lane here. And we get this Des Moines sign. We don't get another Des Moines sign for some time, so interesting that we get Des Moines, but it does make sense. Also, obviously, they are trying to keep you on the toll road to get to Chicago instead of having you take the free route into town. Here we are on the Borman, and on the Borman, there's really not any overhead control cities at all. We get this one for just 80, 94 US 6, and 65 south and north coming soon. 65 itself does get control cities, and we see Gary, Toll Road, Indianapolis, so those make sense. Here's a good look of what it's like to drive on the Borman. This is pretty much what it always is. There's just so many trucks everywhere. And where there's not trucks, there is construction. So another good Borman Expressway experience right here. We cross into Illinois. Welcome to Illinois on the Kingery Expressway briefly here. I-94 is going to split off. It's heading toward downtown Chicago. And we are now going to be on the Tri-State Tollway, 294 North Tollway, 80 West Tollway for Wisconsin and Iowa, because Chicagoland loves using states instead of cities. The Wisconsin one makes sense, but the Iowa, maybe for this one it's okay, but in the future I don't think they should use Iowa. As we're on the Tri-State Tollway, we get one of the famed oases that are all over this road where you get to eat right above the highway. Pretty cool. Done it before. And now 294 is splitting with 80. And just like going eastbound, 294 is the dominant primary road and 80 is the road that is leaving that you have to use the exit lanes for. We pay our toll leaving 294 as we get onto the free part of 80. In fact, I think 80 is free other than a couple of toll bridges on the west coast the whole rest of the way. We meet I-57 and we get an 80 West Des Moines sign. So interesting we get Des Moines and not Iowa here, since the rest of the Chicago ones tend to be Iowa. At an interchange right beyond 57, we get 80 East Gary and 80 West Joliet. And for local traffic, I think that's fine. It's not as silly as putting like East St. Louis or something on there. Gary and Joliet do work for 80 for local traffic at regular interchanges. We get, I believe, our first mileage sign in Illinois, and we get 355-4, Joliet 12, and Des Moines 317. So if Des Moines is your primary control, that's good signage there. We meet 355 sign north for Rockford, and going westbound, this makes an awful lot more sense. I'm fine with this going westbound. I've mentioned this before in some other video, but shout out to Chicagoland for just being road central, and that US 52 even makes a brief cameo in there. That's awesome. US 52 Chicago Street here in Joliet. And getting on the highway in Joliet, you get 80 East Indiana, as it often is, and 80 West Moline Rock Island instead of Des Moines. So that is IDOT's local place that we're going to be signed to. And I'm fine with that. That's way better than, say, LaSalle, Peru or something like that. We meet I-55, so now we're back to 80 West Iowa. They've got that sign that way for whatever reason instead of Des Moines. Our next mileage sign, Moline Rock Island and Des Moines 287. I'd actually be fine with Moline Rock Island being the primary control city here. Metro area is about 500,000 people, Des Moines about 700,000, so fairly negligible. I think signing the Quad Cities would work fine. Here we meet I-39 and 80 is still signed for Des Moines, so keeping it consistent, that's fine, but again, Davenport, Rock Island, Moline, any of those I'd be okay with. Yeah, hope you enjoyed watching that last week. And we get a mileage sign on the other side of 180. We get Rock Island, Moline 62, and Des Moines 236. Here we're on the edge of the Quad Cities. We get our first major junction. We get 80 West Davenport. We have to leave a single lane ramp to follow 80, although it's not a cloverleaf in this direction. And 280, 74 Moline Rock Island ahead. 74 East Peoria is going to be a cloverleaf going south. We're on 80 West Des Moines still, and 88 88 for Sterling and Rock Falls, which is still terrible signage. I thought it should have been Aurora, Chicago going the other direction, but going west, we should just have 88 East Chicago at this point. Because remember, we just merged with I-74. There is northbound I-74 traffic coming from Peoria, or more importantly like Galesburg or something, that would be taking 88 to Chicago. And in fact, this is the 110 CKC Expressway as well. You would take 74 to 88. Not signing Chicago is just ridiculous. We cross the Mississippi River here, same bridge as we did last time. 280 bridge is a little more fun looking, but I decided to take 80 because other than the bridge, 280 is pretty boring. And now we are in Iowa. The people of Iowa welcome you. We're meeting I-74, which for some reason has no overhead sign, but there's probably not a lot of people getting on I-74 going in this direction to go back downtown. They probably would have gone some other way. 80 West Des Moines there in the distance. And now we meet 280 again. 280 sign for Rock Island Moline. 80 West Des Moines. Good times. After leaving the Quad Cities, here's our first major mileage sign. We get Iowa City 46 and Des Moines 157. Good stuff. I showed you Iowa 80 from the road last time. Let's take a up-close look at Iowa 80 this time around, right outside our right window. We're meeting 380, sign for Cedar Rapids and Waterloo. 80 gets no pull-through here, just a through traffic sort of thing. And I skipped ahead to Des Moines, and we get West 235 Des Moines, 3580 Council Bluffs, Kansas City, 35 going north to Minneapolis. So we're going with Council Bluffs here for whatever reason instead of Omaha. At the other interchange, however, it used to say 80 West Council Bluffs Omaha, but now it just says Omaha, so that's pretty awesome. We've got this Omaha exit coming up right here. And here's our split, 35 South Kansas City, 80 West Omaha. Omaha doesn't hold up, of course, though. As soon as we get to an interchange outside of the Des Moines Loop, we are signed for Des Moines and Council Bluffs instead of Omaha. And on the next mileage sign we see, we also get Council Bluffs instead of Omaha, so that's kind of a fail on Iowa's part. That's probably why they were mid-tier in my Midwest rankings. We're approaching 880, the new 880, which is signed for North Omaha and Sioux City. North Omaha's a little weird. I feel like Sioux City would do the job on its own. We get 80 West Council Bluffs Omaha. Council Bluffs is a secondary being on there is fine as long as they got Omaha there. And now we get 80 West Omaha for the express lanes and 2980 as the local lanes for Council Bluffs and 29 south going to Kansas City. Now 80 and 29 will split, 80 going west to Omaha. We're actually going to follow 29 up to 480 and go through Omaha this time around. So here is 480 leaving 29, 480 Omaha. Across the Missouri River, we get a Nebraska welcome sign right there on the gantry on the bridge, so that's cool. 480's control city is I-80 itself. We see again West 480, 280, and Omaha in the distance there. We'll take a look at the Omaha skyline right there. Nice. And now we meet US 75, the North Freeway, as 480 becomes South 480 now, as it makes a turn to the south and joins US 75. We meet I-80, and I-80, not surprisingly, is 80 West Lincoln, so well done there. Here we meet 680, and once again, 680 has no control city, just like eastbound. We cross the Platte River, not for the last time. This is definitely in the future of 80 in Nebraska. And now we see Lincoln is the last city there, 22 miles away. Now we get 180, signed for downtown Lincoln, 180 exiting here. Enjoyed talking about that last week as well. I really hope Nebraska doesn't hire Lance Leopold between the time when I made this and the time when it actually goes live. Or, at all. Leave Kansas football alone. We meet US 77, we get just 80 West straight up, which is really weird. I don't know why we don't get a control city, other than Nebraska might be a little embarrassed about the control cities it has on offer coming here. It should say 80 West Denver, but we see on US 77 it is 80 West Grand Island, which is a sizable town, but as I said, I don't think it should be the control city because it is quite a ways off of I-80. Grand Island on the bottom line at 88 miles away. And right here we go into the longest straightaway in the country. I said it was the Bonneville Salt Flats last time, but I stand corrected. A commenter let me know that it's actually in Nebraska. So here it is, the longest straight non-curving section of the Interstate Highway system in the country. We meet Grand Island and Hastings here. After Grand Island, our next bottom line city is Kearney, which is only 40 miles away. Sign Denver. In Kearney, we get North Platte 97. Again, Denver. Denver. On the mileage signs, North Platte's there as well. North Platte, 87 miles away. Here's our exit for North Platte. And we didn't look at this on the way here, but on the way back, let's check out the Golden Spike Tower for the world's largest railroad yard, the Bailey Yard here in North Platte. Here it is from overhead. It's absolutely huge. Leaving North Platte, we are signed for Sydney at 115 miles, to see Sabalo's former headquarters. I don't know why it's not Denver still. We meet I-76, and I-76 is signed for Denver, weirdly signed south, and 80 is now Cheyenne and Sydney. 80 should just be Cheyenne. No need for Sydney up on that sign, but what are you gonna do? We do get Cheyenne on the bottom line of the next mileage sign after meeting I-76, so that's pretty interesting. No sign of Sydney either. At interchanges, though, it is still Sydney that is signed. And that Cheyenne thing doesn't last long. Sydney shows back up on the mileage signs before long as well. Here's our exit for Sydney. Wow, huge looking place, huh? And in Sydney, we have the choice of North Platte and Cheyenne. Cheyenne's on the bottom line from this point on, Cheyenne 101. And welcome to Wyoming. In Wyoming, we get Cheyenne 39, Rock Springs 296, so we're going beyond the primary control city at this point. And we're going Rock Springs. That's a little weird, huh? We meet the greatest 180, or second greatest, I don't know, second worst, at Central Avenue. So we get this Central Avenue and Greeley. This really surprised me. At this weird I-25 intersection, we get 80 West Rock Springs now. Laramie is larger than Rock Springs, and it's closer than Rock Springs, and it has a university with 15,000 some students. So Laramie seems to be the no-brainer thing there if you're gonna sign anything in Wyoming. In fact, if we look a few years ago, it was 80 West Laramie, so this Rock Springs thing is fairly new. Still 25 Fort Collins. If we look like 10 years ago, it's even better. 80 West Laramie and 25 South Denver. I don't know why they just make it worse and worse. And at interchanges, it is Cheyenne and Laramie that are signed. Laramie and not Rock Springs. So Laramie is our secondary at 43, Rock Springs 251. We meet the highest point on 80 once again, and it is at the Lincoln Memorial between Cheyenne and Laramie. We get a statue of Abe Lincoln there, but he's looking the wrong way. He doesn't see the highway, he sees the other way. Here we are in Laramie, and we get 80 East Cheyenne and 80 West Rawlins. So no Rock Springs mention, Rawlins instead. So yeah, Wyoming is kind of all over the place with this. I stopped in Laramie one time. My buddies and I were driving from Kansas to Seattle, and my buddy and I stopped at a Burger King in Laramie and picked up some food, but my other buddy was asleep in the back. Did we wake him up for that? No, we didn't. He didn't eat again until Idaho because we didn't want to wake him up, but we were also too cheap to buy a Whopper for him, so All right, here we go, and Rawlins 96, Rock Springs 204. Here in Rawlins, we get Rock Springs is our sign at intersections. And here is Rock Springs, we meet 191, which is the way to Yellowstone, so that could be the reason for signing Rock Springs. But it's only signed for Elk Street, no mention of Yellowstone. 80 West Salt Lake from this point. Wow. Not too long ago, though, it was 80 West Green River, so I like Salt Lake better, for sure. At interchanges, though, it is still 80 Green River. This very interchange, in fact. Here in Green River, we also have this pull-through for 80 West Salt Lake. A couple years ago, we can see it was 80 West Evanston. So they are trying to change the control cities. I think they wanted just to be Salt Lake City, Rock Springs, Cheyenne, Sydney. But I would much prefer Omaha, Cheyenne, Laramie, Salt Lake City. And here we meet US 30, I believe for the last time, as it goes off to Pocatello. Wow, that's quite far. And 80 West Evanston and Salt Lake. So Evanston's on the sign. The mileage signs, Evanston 58, Salt Lake 144. Perfectly done there. Lyman! But they did make it a control city going westbound, so I got no beef with it. It's fine. Here we are in Evanston, and again, we are on West 80 Salt Lake. And welcome to Utah! We enter Utah now. We go right for the Wasatch. Utah is looking pretty beautiful here. Really awesome start to Utah. We meet I-84, which is signed for Ogden, and 80 West Salt Lake. I've actually seen the old version of this sign from way back in the day when it was 80 and 80 North. 80 was signed for Salt Lake and San Francisco. 80 North was signed for Ogden and Portland. So this sign is pretty awesome. Appreciate the use of that. Shout out to alpsroads.net. Here's 40 East. And this is actually the very end of US 40. From this point on, I-80 is often built right on top of US 40, because US 40 used to go to San Francisco, now it ends here in Utah. Quite an approach into Salt Lake City. 215 we're meeting in half a mile, and wow, look at this road. 80 West Salt Lake City SLC Airport, and we're meeting South 215 there. And now we come down the mountain into Salt Lake City. Pretty cool view. We're meeting I-15. I-15 is signed for Las Vegas, and north for Salt Lake with 80 West Reno. Wonder why they get different control cities, since they're going to be concurrent and both going into Salt Lake. Now 15 gets North Ogden, and 80 is getting West Reno and the airport. On the ramp to 80 here, we can take a look at the downtown Salt Lake City skyline. Once we're outside of Salt Lake City, though, we get Elko on the bottom line instead of Reno, so that's a little weird. Maybe Nevada's been influencing them to put in Elko. And at intersections also, Elko, Salt Lake City. Some of the mileage signs still have Reno, though. Reno, 453. Quite a hike. Here is the Utah tree out in the middle of the Bonneville Salt Flats in the middle of nowhere. It is not a real tree. And here's a look at the Bonneville Salt Flats out to the right as we drive down I-80. Pretty impressive scenery. Looks like the moon or something. And we come into Nevada. In Nevada, we are once again just signed for Elko. Not too surprisingly, Nevada likes signing Elko. And here in Elko, we are now signed for Reno and Salt Lake City. On the mileage signs, we see Reno is on the bottom line, still quite far at 286. And now we're meeting US 95. North Lakeview and Boise. Wow, nice long distance control city for a US highway there in Nevada. That's awesome. We're concurrent with US 95 for a while, but now we have South US 95's exit, and it gets Las Vegas. Again, awesome job, Nevada. Now we're coming into Reno, and we get the 580 intersection, and we're now on West 80 Sacramento. And we take a look at our rear view mirror, seeing downtown Reno as we climb out of town. And welcome to California. We're in the Sierra Nevadas right away. Great views right here. We see the Truckee River right next to I-80 here, and fantastic views as we go through the Sierra Nevadas here. Just amazing. Here's the California agricultural checkpoint. Make sure we don't take any apples from Nevada or something into California. And now we get Truckee, Auburn, and Sacramento. Good mileage sign here. After Auburn, we get all the way to San Francisco. Sacramento 100, San Francisco 189. Cool. And we get an overhead 80 West Sacramento as we meet California 65. Here in the Sacramento area, we've got San Francisco on 80 West and 80 Business, Capital City Freeway to Sacramento, which we're going to take that this time. So we meet 160 for downtown Sacramento and 80 West, Capital City Freeway, no control city. Business 80 technically continues here on US 50, but it's not signed. It's only signed as US 50. So now we get US 50 West, San Francisco, 50 West 280 San Francisco as we meet I-5, which is signed for Los Angeles and Redding. And here's a look at the Sacramento skyline as we cross the Sacramento River here. Now we meet I-80 again. It is signed West San Francisco. Makes perfect sense. And we get one of these old-timey California overheads with 80 San Francisco right here. We meet the 505. It is signed for Redding. Now we're getting kind of into the Bay Area here. We meet our first real Bay Area 3-digit interstate, 680, which is signed all the way for San Jose, which is pretty cool. It does make it all the way down there. And now we're meeting 780, which is signed for 2680, which again also makes sense. We cross the bridge into the proper East Bay, and this time around it is free. You don't have to pay to go into the East Bay here. We're merging with 580. We cannot get to 580 from here. We can only continue southbound 580 and westbound 80 as they merge together. And this Bayshore Freeway is pretty cool. You can see the San Francisco skyline in the background over there. And we approach the MacArthur Maze, so we're getting 580 for downtown Oakland and 880 for Alameda, San Jose, 80 San Francisco, 3 right lanes. So no option for Highway 24 coming in this direction, but that's fine. We're approaching the Bay Bridge here. We get the toll crossing fee, $7. Well, I feel better about paying that than for the other bridge. We paid $7 going the other way around. Still, when I crossed this bridge in 1997 or whatever, it was $1. $1, I tell you. Here we cross the Bay Bridge, and this is on the Oakland side, so this is the new cable-stayed bridge. And after going through Treasure Island, we are on the long-existing suspension bridge. We've got great views of San Francisco as we come into town. Here's another look at that. It is pretty amazing driving on this bridge. This is a great bridge to drive on. How you just fly into town. It's almost like you're, on a low-flying plane or something. It's great. And we've got some exits here, Fremont Street and Harrison Street, Embarcadero. The skyline looming just to our right. This has always struck me as odd. So we get to San Francisco and we are not on 101 yet. We are still on I-80, but we are now signed for 101, San Jose and Golden Gate Bridge. We're signed, in fact, for both directions of 101. 80 signage is completely gone. And here is our split where we have the choice between North and South 101. And there is no 80 end sign because California just never does that except for I-8 for some reason. All right, let's talk about Todd's The Way It Should Be for this monster of a road. I'm going to say the way it should be. Westbound Patterson, I agree with, like I said earlier in the video. Scranton is what it should be from Patterson because of 380. It's definitely the logical pick. State College from the 380 split until I-99, not Belafonte or Bloomsburg or whatever. Youngstown from 99 on should be the way to go. And then Cleveland, Toledo, Chicago. From Chicago, I'd go with Davenport or Rock Island or Moline instead of Iowa or Des Moines. I won't argue too much with it. Then Des Moines, I would sign. Then Omaha, no Council Bluffs for sure. Omaha all the way. Then Lincoln. I would sign Denver from Lincoln because Denver is a much bigger city than Cheyenne. A lot more people are going there, and via I-76, of course. Cheyenne after the I-76 split. I'd sign Laramie out of Cheyenne. University seems like the big thing to do. Although maybe if signing Rock Springs annoys Josh Allen, I guess I'm okay with that. And then I would sign Salt Lake City from Laramie on. Reno from Salt Lake City. I'd skip over Elko at this point. I know Elko is growing, but I don't feel like it needs to be on the sign for another 10, 20 years. Then Sacramento works from Reno as they do, and then San Francisco as they do would work as well. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Control City Freak. Algorithmically speaking, there's a video right over here that you have probably not seen before, so check that out if you will. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Really appreciate your viewership, guys. Thank you so much. My name is Todd, and keep on trucking.